This is going to propel a lot of gluten-free research. Okay, until this point in time, not too many people know what they're working with. We were all working blind, right? Now we know how to characterize our flours, how we can prepare and predict flour quality. One of the biggest issues I've heard from all the gluten-free bakeries are the fact that they cannot predict their flour quality when it comes in. And because of that, water is added wrong, stickiness issue happens at the depositors, and out goes the dough into the dump. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about this particular predictive technology and how gluten-free bakers like yourself can go out, use this to lower your costs by predicting the quality of your product.
Well, that's a great question, actually. This is very interesting because today, when you look at the world of quality control instruments, you have plenty of them, and most of them, they are completely focused on the gluten. And this is the case of the albograph, for instance, you know, the device that makes a bubble of dough. Well, just try to make a bubble of dough with a gluten-free product. And same thing with an extensograph or a farinograph. The thing is that even if you can have an information with the farinograph, for instance, well, you lack a lot of information because gluten-free product is mainly starch. And so then you have other products such as the RVA or such as the amylograph, for instance. And those products are very interesting, but they work on a very diluted dough. This is completely liquid. And this has nothing to do with the viscosity of a gluten-free dough that a baker is used to handle. So here, what is interesting with the Mixolab is that you can really work on your product and what is interesting to you at your hydration. This is why I would say this is probably the most adapted tool on the market right now for gluten-free products. Well, that depends on the consistency of the batter, really. If it's too liquid, you might have some difficulties, but even like that, we have made extensive analysis and we have a lot of contacts that work with gluten-free product for years. And we have been able to analyze a very wide range of viscosities. So I would say, try and look for yourself. Here in this example with the gluten-free protocol, this is around 90 grams of dough, so around 50 to 60 grams of flour. So this is very limited. So it looks a lot like the RVA curve, I completely agree. And so then the question is, if rice flour show the curve you showed, and then adding protein, it shifts. Is it fair to say not all the starch is being gelatinized? That depends really. If you mean that it shifts in time, and that might just mean that it needs more energy to gelatinize, but that doesn't mean all the starch will not be gelatinized. Then if the intensity of the gelatinization changes, that might be linked with some of the starch being gelatinized and some not so much. But here I would have to go into greater details in the theoretical part to answer you. But if you want to write me an email about that, I would love to search and see what I have in the bibliography. Okay, so that's actually a very nice question as well. With the Mixolab, we can play with the dough weights according to the kind of products. For instance, when we work with wheat flour or wheat dough, we don't need 90 grams, just 75 grams is enough. But with 90 grams, with the gluten protocol, with the gluten-free protocol, we have found to have better results, more discriminant and more repeatable. So this is why we have chosen the 90-gram dough weights. Now, if with your product or with your mixes, you have an overfill of the bowl, then you can absolutely decrease that to 80 grams or even 75. That is a very difficult one. I have no idea. I have absolutely no idea. I'm not a specialist about products or gums, but if you give me a Mixolab and one of those ingredients, I would be happy to test it.
I think it's safe to say that any gums is possible. Also, hydrocolloids, any kind of hydrocolloids. The thing is, it really depends on your market. Some markets, like the US, the clean market, doesn't like to see xanthan or guar gum, and those are picked up and substituted by surprisingly methyl cellulose, right? And also, I've seen a lot of substitution through fiber for those gums with flax and with other soluble fibers. So it really depends on what characteristics you're after. And sometimes gums may not be even needed. And the nicest part is now we can use the Mixolab to figure out what we need and what we don't need.
Yeah, for example, use hemp protein.
That too, yeah.
There are a lot of advantages when it comes to gluten-free to choosing the Mixolab, because on one hand, well, you could test those samples with the farinograph, but the thing is, you will have information about water absorption and mixing properties, but those are very limited. That correspond to the first part of the curve of the Mixolab. And then with the Mixolab, you have access to all of those data additionally. And then I could go on and on by saying you have to use less sample with the Mixolab. So that's also that you are saving a lot of samples, but mainly I would say you get so much more information when you use a Mixolab.
Don't forget the starch retrogradation and the staling property of gluten-free is so much more significant as compared to wheat-based flours. And the farinograph is just not set up for that. Like the farinograph doesn't record how the starch characterizes during pasting, cooking and cooling, where the Mixolab does. And that will give you a lot of information on how soft your product is going to stay over shelf life. So that is the biggest difference I see between the two instrumentation, other than the reporting. So this is why the farinograph is not as superior as the Mixolab in understanding gluten-free flours.
Exactly. That's exactly that. We have actually made a study where we were able to to make a formulation with a limited retrogradation to increase the shelf life of the product. So this would be something impossible to see with a farinograph.
Correct.
No, as long as it is not grain, it will not be an issue. As long as it will not damage the blade, we have tested wide range of granulometry, including masa flour. Masa, corn masa. Yes, that's the one. Sorry, with sometimes quite big particle size. So no, that would not be an issue.
Dough with inclusions, I guess.
I would say yes.
Depends on how big your inclusions are.
Yeah. But then you're going to mix the dough and the fruit filling.
Yeah, I suggest not do that.
Well, you can.
I suggest to remove the fruit first, because what you're after is really the quality of the dough, not the quality of the performance. Like you want to make sure that the receiving portion of your process that you're receiving. I mean, most people who are baking gluten-free are receiving flour, that's already blended, right? Like, I don't know, rice flour, hemp protein, whatever. So you test that flour as is first, just with water, and see what happens. Your goal with this machinery is to make sure that it's consistent. Right? It's the same as what you bought, is what you paid for. So the fruit is really not important, because the fruit is just, it's not going to affect the quality, the incoming quality of your flour. So I would suggest for you to, leave the fruit out and test the dough first before using the flour that you receive. So ultimately, anything inclusions or large grains of flour or large grains of whole kernels is going to affect the mixing and the baking quality, but that's not the concern. The concern is really incoming consistent flour quality that you have to set as a parameter for your miller, for your flour blend person. And then when you get that to be consistent every time they send you a shipment, then that's like 90% of your problem solved right there. So really, I hope, if anything you take away from this session, is I finally found a way that I could keep my flour quality consistent and reduce the wastage coming from inconsistencies.
Yeah, that's exactly that. Thank you. Thank you so much, Lin.
You're welcome.
Okay, so a lot of questions.
I'll let Lena do this. This is Lena's specialty.
Yeah, exactly. So that's good. I can answer to this one. Not so much about the type of gun, but this one I can.
Yeah.
Yeah. So again, here, this is about the amount of information and the, how do you say that, the interest of this information. Here, with the RVA, you are going to see something starting from the gelatinization, where with the Mixolab, you also have access to this part before the gelatinization. So that's the first thing. That's more information. Then the second thing is that the RVA doesn't work on a dough. It works on a very liquid product. It's a very diluted dough, let's say. And this doesn't look like a normal dough. This is not like the dough a baker is able to handle. That's not the same thing. And the thing is, in a dough, there is a lot of competition for the water. And the fibers, the starch, the gluten, not the gluten in this case, the proteins are going to fight for the water. So if you put as many water as you want, then everything is going to develop at its full potential. But that's not the case in a dough. And that's what that's why we are doing with the Mixolab something way more diluted, way more comparable to what a baker could do. And so it's just more representative. So yeah, I would say that's more information and more, not accurate, but interesting, links to the process information. If you mean during the process, well, you can correlate the Mixolab water absorption to what you do in your process. If it's about using the Mixolab, then you can work at adapted hydration, meaning that with the just like with the pharenograph, you make a first test with a certain hydration. Like you said, I don't know, 60% or 70% water absorption. Well, you can set up a target torque, a target consistency. If you want, that can be the one of your process. Like you take a dough from the production line and then you see what is the torque. And then you see if with this amount of water, like this 60 or 70%, if you are above or below the target. And if you are above, that means that you need to add water. And if you're below, that means that you need to remove water. And so this is why how you know the amount of water to add.
And I would like to add, this hasn't even been studied yet. We're at the forefront of understanding water absorption in gluten-free flours, right? So how do we know what is the optimal absorption? We have no idea. Optimal water absorption in gluten-free flours is very different from wheat-based flours, okay? Wheat-based flours is all based on gluten quality and quantity, right? Gluten-free flours, it's all based on the starch component and the hydrocolloid component. So all gluten-free bakers that are working out there right now have different systems. Not everyone uses hydrocolloids. Not everyone uses modified starches. But if you do that, you have to consistently test the performance of these flours just to get a baseline to understand what is your optimal water absorption. So we are in this area of unknown, and this is what excites me the most. Because it is unknown, you don't know what's your optimum. You just have to test it. This is what excites me, Lena.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And this is what is truly interesting with gluten-free product is that there is so much to do. So yeah, so many applications to run. So if you have some, don't hesitate to contact us. We would be happy to help.
All right, thank you.
Well, thank you.
Thanks everyone for coming. And this week's recording is going to be available next week. We have CHOPIN's information on the chat window if you need any more information. And I do appreciate you carving up your time for us today and learning from Lena. Thank you, Lena, for coming.
Well, thank you so much, Lin, for inviting me. That was great. And thank you so much, everyone, for coming.
Thank you.
And my accent for
I love it.
More than an hour.
Bye.
Goodbye.